It's our pleasure to welcome you to the Erase Racism special, very special benefit. I'm Marge Rogatz, a founding board member of Erase Racism. A former co-chair and current secretary.
And I'm Lorna Lewis. I am the Assistant Secretary for Erase Racism and, of course, the Superintendent of Malvern School District.
What makes this benefit so special? First, it's that we're celebrating and honoring our visionary, inspiring founding president, V. Elaine Gross. I've had the privilege of working with Elaine and learning from her, and everybody who knows Elaine knows what I mean when I say learning from her. And on a very personal level, I love Elaine and her husband, Jess, and my husband, Peter, and I will miss having them on Long Island. You'll hear more from and about Elaine during the program. Tonight is also special because we celebrate the importance of being with all of you in this room again. We have a beautiful mixture of longtime supporters of Erase Racism, folks who have been with us from the beginning and have stayed with us for many, many years. And there are also folks here who are newer to our organization, who connect with our mission, who are advocates in their own communities, and have shown up for us again as advocates to support our work. To each and every one of you, we say a heartfelt thank you.
Erase Racism would particularly like to thank those who support us throughout the year, starting with our steadfast friends at the Roush Foundation and the Long Island Unitarian Universalist Fund at the Long Island Community Foundation, and our new sponsor, Janie Heller Foundation. What is it? It's not written on here. I don't have it. We also want to thank tonight's special benefit, the sponsors, and if you could hold your applause until the very end. The benefactor sponsors, the Saltzman Family Foundation, leadership sponsor, Howard Glickstein, trailblazer sponsor, 1199 SEIU Healthcare Workers East, Kalpana Bangdahar, I knew I was going to screw that up, Vindaho Bat, Kalpana is our co-chair. Concern for Independent Living, Napoli Schnotlick PLLC, Arda Nazarian, Northwell Health, Phillips and Associates, the Roush Foundation, Marty and Jane Schwartz, Scope Education Services. We thank you. And sustainer sponsors, Ronnie Broncasio, Elaine and Jess Gross, Paula and Bill Jennings, Dr. Joan Lang, Long Island Community Foundation, New York State Nurses Association, Marge and Peter Rogatz, TD Bank, Albanese Foundation, or Albanese Organization. So let's applaud them all. I don't have that. Okay, very good. The names of many more devoted donors can be found in the benefit journal, and their names are being scrolled on the screen on both sides of the stage. So it was supposed to be scrolled on the screen. on both. It will be, and as the dinner is going along, we thank you all. Lastly, we want to acknowledge our wonderful benefit committee who worked so hard to put so many of the details together for tonight. None of it could have happened, however, without the patient guidance and help of Erase Racism's 1 in a million controller of operations manager, Shirley Charenfant, and the thoughtful expert assistance of Nicole Grennan and Olivia DeFonso. Could these 3 dynamic women and the members of the benefit committee please stand so we may recognize you all.
Erase Racism is at an important turning point. Our founding president, Elaine Gross, the person who has steered the ship for more than 21 years, is retiring. It is really important to us that we take the time to reflect on the amazing accomplishments of Elaine, the Erase Racism team, our allies and partners who have made such an incredible, really a difference that all of us on Long Island feel. They have taken aim at the structural racism, engaging the public and elected officials, and driving real policy change forward on the local and the state level. At the same time, there is much, much more work to do. Our search for Elaine's successor is underway, and we are confident that we will find another exceptional leader to take Erase Racism to the next steps on its journey. As Elaine has always reminded us, in order to know where we're going, we have to know our history. Suzy Sonneburg, the creative, magnetic, former executive director of the Long Island Community Foundation, has come all the way from Maine to be here to honor Elaine and to remind us of Erase Racism's early history. I was on the Community Foundation board when Suzy, recognizing the pernicious effect of institutional and structural racism on Long Island, hired Elaine, and I worked with both of them. Lucky me, I learned from both of them. In those early days, Erase Racism evolved from a project incubated at the Long Island Community Foundation into an independent, incorporated, not-for-profit organization. Suzy was a treasured Erase Racism board member until she moved away from Long Island. She remains a treasured friend. Suzy, we're thrilled to have you here and to welcome you to the podium. Where are you? Sitting behind me. I'm here.
Good evening. I'm too short. I can barely see over this thing, but I see there are lots of real people in front of me as opposed to images on a computer screen, which is so wonderful. Thank you. Yay. And Marge, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. That was lovely. Okay, so my son had a birthday a few weeks ago. And even though he was born more than, yes, half a century ago, his birthday always brings up memories of the day he was born, along with a whole set of images of him as a baby and as a young child. And I have to tell you honestly that today, or this evening's event, is having the same effect on me. I am remembering when Erase Racism was born and the beginnings of the journey that brought us to this moment. So I'd like to share some of those memories with you, and I'm giving permission to anyone who was on the founding board. If you think that I'm wrong with what I remember, just yell it out, add to it, correct it, edit it, whatever, but these are my memories. All right, it all started in the late 90s when I was invited by Newsday to participate in one of a series of focus groups they were scheduling to look at the black-white divide on Long Island. The groups were assigned based on skin color, and I was frankly stunned by what I heard in my all-white group that evening. The only specific question that I remember now is, how many black families would have to move into... Gone. Okay. How many black families would have to move into your neighborhood for you to consider it integrated? And the answer from the majority of participants was 1. So at the Foundation's next board meeting, I told the board members what I had heard, and I suggested that we do something, that as the Community Foundation, we needed to do something about racism on Long Island. In fact, I even brought Marge Rogatz and some other people in to talk about how racism was manifested in our communities. And eventually, everyone agreed that we really did have to do something. But the thing was, we had no idea what the something was. And then I did probably the smartest thing of my 21-year tenure at the Foundation. I reached out to my friend, Elaine Gross, someone I knew and respected, both personally and professionally, and who was fortuitously between jobs at that moment. And I proposed hiring her as a consultant for 1 month to help us figure out what to do. Elaine agreed, if hesitantly, but she warned me that we might not want to do what she recommended. When Elaine came back a month later and presented us with the outlines of what would become Erase Racism, we knew we had to do it. We raised the money to hire Elaine and to implement what was then a project of the Long Island Community Foundation, and we began to convene people to help identify the initial issue areas, which turned out to be, and still are, housing and education. And that was the birth. So I'm going to share just a few highlights of the childhood years that still stand out in my memory. And the first thing was, we needed a name for the project. And we came up with a few possibilities and then decided to run them past Fred Brewington. Where are you, Fred? You're somewhere over there, right? Okay. We decided to run them past Fred and have him help us choose one of them. And he shot all of them down. Do you remember what you said, Fred? I do. I'm not going to say it in public. Well, basically, he told us they were too ambiguous and too wimpy, and we needed something bold. So we went back to the drawing board, and we ultimately settled on education, research, advocacy, and support to eliminate racism. Acronym, ERASE. And then we decided to go to Newsday and talk to Joy Brown. Is Joy here tonight? We decided to go to talk to Joy Brown. She was the person who had edited the series on the black-white divide that the focus group had been a part of. And Joy was totally supportive, but skeptical. She told us that we would have accomplished a lot if we just got people to acknowledge that there was racism on Long Island, even just to say the word. Elaine responded to that challenge by suggesting that we bring John Powell to Long Island to carry out a research project identifying the intersections of race and poverty in our 2 counties. When that study was finished, we organized a conference to present his findings that Long Island was one of the most segregated suburban communities in the country. and we invited the press. That conference, Elaine, was that 2001? 2002. That conference really was the turning point for us. It was the moment that made it all real. Erase Racism was suddenly in the media, front page of Newsday, all the major TV networks, and the New York Times. With those credentials, we were able to approach the Ford Foundation. We were lucky in that the former director of the New Orleans Community Foundation had just become a program officer at Ford. I knew her from Community Foundation conferences, so we had initial access. Elaine brought the credibility. John's research had the punch, and after a long courtship, Erase received the first of many grants from the Ford Foundation. So from the outset, the deal had been that the Long Island Community Foundation would support Erase Racism for 3 years, and then it would have to spin off as an independent nonprofit. As I recall, we made it ahead of the deadline. Erase Racism Incorporated with Elaine as president, and we formed the first board, which included Fred Brewington, despite what he said about our names, Marge Rogatz, Marty Schwartz, Abe Krasnoff, and me, and a few other Long Island Community Foundation board members. It was my honor and privilege to work with Elaine through those early years. I learned so much from her, as Marge said, both personally and professionally. Yes, Elaine is a visionary, but she is not a pie-in-the-sky visionary. She is always grounded and backed up by carefully researched facts. When making her case, she is rational and able somehow to control her emotions so that her often felt and always justified sorrow and rage do not give others an excuse to discredit her. Personally, prior to the birth of Erase Racism, I considered myself to be absolutely blameless for the racism in our society. I was shamefully unaware of the privileges conferred on me because of my skin color. I had no understanding of being complicit, of being part of the problem. Learning the truth was a slow and very painful process. But thanks to Elaine and the organization she created, I've now had more than 20 years of living and working through a consciously anti-racist lens. Thank you. Those of you who have experienced the Cultural Bridges anti-racism training offered by Erase Racism know that one of the first questions asked is, on whose shoulders do you stand in doing this work? For me, and I would guess for some of you in this room and beyond, the answer is Elaine Gross. Thank you.